Welcome to the Rant Live. Welcome, everyone, to the Rant Live today, Thursday, April 21st. How's it going, Evan?
It's going well. I've got my new Seiya shirt from Obvious Shirts on here. So for those of you who are children of the 80s and 90s who remember the Sega logo, so I was excited about that. It's been an interesting few days. So I had a really good phone call before this. Looking forward to some things. So we're moving in the right direction on a number of fronts. So that is good.
Okay, well that sounds positive, and yeah, I dig that shirt. Did you mail order that?
I did, yeah. It took a little while because I think at the time you could buy them. They had them in the store, but I think you had to pre-order them to ship. But I think it took about a week or so not very long at all. Just got it while I was out of town Monday, Tuesday, and it was here waiting for me when I got back home on Tuesday night. So it's the first time wearing it.
Representing the obvious shirts.
If I wasn't so muscular, it would fit my arms better. Unfortunately, the gun show is it's a little tight in the arms, but
it's all good. That's all good. Just as long as it doesn't look like a 10-year-old shirt you're trying to
right. No, definitely no mediums. No mediums here. I'm a far sight from a medium these days, so it's all XLs for me. Although it's funny, like the way some of these shirts fit, clothes in general. I find that with even hats, and it's like you can buy the sizes are not very universal, is what I've found. So you can find some where it's like a large is really big, and then you get the XL and you're swimming in it. Although I've gotten to the point now, I'm like, man, there's no way this shirt will fit. And I put it on, I'm like, oh God, that's not great. Like, why does this thing look like a bed sheet before I put it on? And now it fits fine. Oh boy. So we're getting there.
Yeah, it's dad bod time,
Yeah, absolutely. I got no shame. I'm almost 43. We're getting close.
There you go. I started this cool 28-day workout program where it's just all sit-ups and push-ups, but it's 28 straight days. And so I'm on day 15 or 16 or something like that. But I'm it's something I travel a lot. And so it's something that I always wanted to do was kind of have, some workout regimen where I didn't need weights and I could just knock it out in 15, 20 minutes. It's very convenient.
Nice.
Trying. So we're working on getting our guest set up here. In the meantime, we are and we'll get into the results of the Cubs series against the Rays, which was not very sunny, needless to say, but
and figuratively both.
Exactly, but it was what it was, and not there wasn't a lot. I didn't even do much research into the series because there just wasn't a ton to take away from it. But one thing that I do want to ask you about as Ben gets resituated here is why is David Ross not putting Nick Madrigal in the leadoff spot? Let's just talk about that.
I don't know. If I am being honest with you, I mean, it feels like, again, the contact back, good base runner, he's got some of those skills that you think would fit there. And, at least to this point, Rafael Ortega has not been hitting very well. Right. So
that's an understatement.
Yeah. And I mean, let's be honest, Madrigal got off to a really slow start as well. He hasn't been doing much himself, but I'd rather see that than where
put him up there though. That's what I'm saying.
And I know this sounds weird, but it's if you put him down in the order, they've hit into so many double plays, right? And he's a bit of a double play candidate just because he is, a ground ball contact type of hitter. And so, or the one thing Ortega has done well, I mean, his OBP is still significantly higher than his batting average, which
that's because he's gotten 5 walks.
Right. And I mean, that is there, but it's overall, that doesn't seem like the best fit for him. So I don't know. I am interested in that, although it does seem like that leadoff spot is an area where I mean, how many times did we question Joe Madden about that? Like, you're putting who? You're doing what with leadoff? So it'll happen.
Well, Joe Madden had a better resume, I would say, than David Ross at this point, but we'll get to that. But in the meantime, I'm excited to welcome our guest today. He signed with the Cubs as an undrafted free agent in 2020 after that the COVID season where they shortened the draft to 5 rounds. It's currently pitching at AAA Iowa. Let's bring him to the show. Welcome, Ben. How are you, Ben Leeper? Can you hear us?
Doing great. Hopefully, hopefully y'all can hear me a little bit better now. I keep trying to leave the room and get a little bit better internet connection. So I hope all is well, guys.
Yeah, everything's great. Thank you for taking some time for us and for for venturing about, try to find the best internet in the area. I don't know where are you guys at right now? I should know this, but where are you staying?
So currently,
city-wise, not
we're
hotel.
in Louisville right now, some place, but unfortunately, the whole hotel, no Wi-Fi, internet anywhere, and so it's like I've been fighting for phone service all week.
That's oddly enough, so I don't know why this is. I have AT&T. South Florida is like awful for it. If you're in Fort Lauderdale with AT&T, good luck. Or on Spirit Airlines, either way. I had Wi-Fi for like 5 minutes on my flight home. It was wonderful. Yeah, so I kind of joked. We've had Scott Kobos on the show before. He was in that same signing class with you, and so I joked with him. I said, you could say you were a 6th round draft pick, really, in 2020 because there were only 5 rounds. But I do wonder with guys like, both of you did really, really well immediately after coming into the organization. I mean, heck, you started out at AA and almost immediately got bumped up. Did you have a bit of a chip on your shoulder, kind of because maybe you were a little bit overlooked because people maybe didn't have that regard for you? And we can get into maybe why a little bit, but did that give you a little extra motivation to really come in and perform right away? And maybe that question will have to be re-asked here in a little bit.
Oh, the joy of the internet. It's
Louisville, fix your connections.
Fix your stuff, man.
It's Kentucky.
I'm not sure what that was, but yeah, well, I'm on. Are you plugged in? Because I'm on. I'm on Wi-Fi. I do Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
you're on Wi-Fi.
Yep.
Which works out pretty well most of the time. But hopefully we'll get Ben back. We're having connection issues.
Well, I used to have to. I moved my location. For those who have been with us on the show for a long time, I used to have a different background, which is just my natural background in my basement. But I used to have to be in a different spot because it was more central to the Wi-Fi, to the router. Which is like more above me. And when I move over, because I'm in the basement and there's like metal studs in the walls for the drywall and all that stuff, and so I think that jacks with the connection. So it's not great here, but since we switched to Wi-Fi, I can be over here, and it actually works out better.
Okay, we have been back.
Let's bring him back.
Trying to make this work.
No, all right, no problem. Back. So I will shorten the question that I asked, but as John mentioned, you're an undrafted free agent. No, you're good, man. You're good. We do rank our guests based on their connection. And so like when we come out with our year end of year thing, that's what we have to use for that. So far, Max Bain is well out in front. And then Scott Efros is behind him. You're running 3, but we'll see how that goes. But realistically, my actual question, did not being drafted, and I know it was a short draft, right? Only 5 rounds, but did that put a little bit of a chip on your shoulder when you came into the organization of trying to really want to prove yourself as just as good as any of these other guys who got selected?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that whole year was just it's a whole different animal with the 5 rounds, and I was getting hopeful that it would be 10 because I kind of knew that between my age and my history that it was going to be hard to fall within those top 5 rounds, and so I was hopeful for those extra 5 to be added on there. But yeah, I mean, when I was leading up to the draft, I was in communication with a lot of people within the Cubs organization. And so going up to it, it was basically one of those things that, after the draft, I knew how the free agent opportunity was going to work, and that, when the Cubs came calling, I knew it was exactly where I wanted to be. And it definitely, I wouldn't say much of a chip on your shoulder. It was just like, all right, like it's time to go prove yourself now. Like it's starting to get a little more real.
So you mentioned, and you alluded to it, age and history, and part of that history and part of the reason your age was maybe a little bit more advanced than most guys coming out of college at that level. I mean, you've had 2 elbow surgeries, right? 2 Tommy John surgeries. I've undergone some surgery, and I know that even as like a fat old guy trying to deal with having a hernia surgery, like that was enough for me to be like, man, this is tough. Like rehabbing this is not fun. What, and I'm trying to think of the right way to put this, but did you already kind of have that mentality of like, I'm going to push through whatever's in my way, and that helped you to get through having those 2 surgeries, or did having those surgeries force you to develop a little bit more of that resilience? What kind of a ratio, I guess, are we looking at there?
I would say it definitely taught me resilient. In high school, I was a young, naive kid that, baseball is going to last forever. And I was like, I never thought it would be me that would be getting hurt. And then as a junior in high school, I remember feeling the pop in my elbow, and I was like, there's no way this is happening right now. And coming back from that, I had a lot of struggles with rehab. It took me roughly 19 months to come back from my first TJ surgery. And so like it just it taught me to be a lot more mentally in tune with my body and just to be tougher. And so when I got back, I found like I finally got over the hill. And then 2 weeks into my freshman year at Oklahoma State, I felt the same exact pain. It was like it was almost one of those unfathomable feelings. It's like this can't be happening again. And lo and behold, I went in for the MRI, and it came back with some damage. And it was like one of those things that I was already so down on myself. It was like, well, you have 2 choices. Either you can basically hang it up, or you can learn to fight back. And so I think going through all of that really has helped me develop the mentality that I have today. Just learning that I'm not going to be the guy that takes myself out of the game. That like my arm better be broken in half for me to come off the mound.
Well, I mean, obviously you've come into the organization really quickly. Clearly have proven yourself as a in prospect parlance as a dude. I mean, moving up as fast as you did, starting to dominate. Did you? I mean, I think everybody comes in. You've got to be confident in order to pitch at the level that you have. But did you anticipate being able to move so quickly up through the organization? Fairly brief stop at AA, and then quickly into AAA, and really finding success right out of the gate. Was that on par with your expectations, or did things kind of come together a little bit more quickly than even you had anticipated?
Definitely a little bit of both. That I have very high expectations for myself out on the field, and so like I probably am a little more optimistic than most in what I expect on a day-to-day basis. But it was one of those things that when I was assigned to high A, I was like getting in my head. I was like, all right, what do I need to do as a pitcher to move up to the next level? And when I got there, they're like, "Hey, just leave your stuff in your car. You're going to AA." And I was like, "Wow, like this is
that's what you've
this
got
is
to do,
getting
right? You just show
this is
up, and that's it."
yeah, just pack your bags a certain way, I guess. And so I was driving to Tennessee, and my parents were actually driving up to South Bend at the time, and I had to call them. I was like, "Y'all need to start heading east now." And um, so I think they were a little bit south of Omaha, and they were able to cut over and make it. But yeah, no, it was awesome. And I mean, I stepped in the AA locker room, and you have proven players that have been there for a while, and it's like, do I really fit in here? And what I kept finding myself fighting is, well, like other people believe I should be in here, so I need to have that same mindset that they wouldn't have put me in here if they didn't feel like that I could succeed at this level. And honestly, it was nerve-wracking at first in Double A. I was like, these are some really good professional hitters, and I was always constantly asking guys like, how does this compare to a college lineup? And they're like, this is going to be like the best college lineup you'll see. And I was like, dang, I didn't have that best success in college. This is going to be a long season. But it was a great transition. And then once I got to AAA, it was even more of surreal feeling of that this is starting to get a little more real every day. It's just it was hard to stop and smell the roses at times, but I really tried to just basically be where my feet were every day last year. I could only focus on where I was at the current time and not worry about stuff down the road.
It's interesting to hear you say that, right? And you're obviously being very modest. Obviously experienced a little bit of success in college there, but I know part of what has led you to the success in the pro. I mean, you've got a great mix of a really nice fastball, right? Explosive, upper 90s fastball, maybe the best slider in the entire organization. Ethan Roberts would probably, maybe, he'd stand a chance to perhaps hold an argument there with us on that one, because the new grip that he's got, that thing is insane, and the spin he generates. But again, a lot of people would argue in your case, when did that develop? I mean, have you always had that slider? Is it something that you just picked up and it clicked, or is that something that you've really worked on over time to sort of perfect and hone, and it's only just now coming into its own?
Well, first of all, yeah. When I got to pro ball, having to play catch with Ethan Roberts was a real eye opener for me. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the kind of stuff that I have to play catch with. And then that was I remember showing up in Tennessee and he was spinning his slider and his curveball, and I'm just trying to jump out of the way, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way. But back to the slider. So I was actually warming up to go into a game at Kansas my junior year, and our pitching coach walked down to the bullpen. And at the time, my slider was like 80 to 83. It wasn't anything special. It had a lot of spin. And he walked down there, and there's like 2 outs to go into the inning, and he looks at me and goes, "You have to have a new slider by the time you go into the game." And I was just like, and, and I was like, okay. And so I gripped a 4-seam fastball. I moved my thumb up a little bit, and I started just to rip it. And I was like, well, I guess we're taking this out there. And I threw one in warm-ups, and I turned around, and the radar gun said 88. And I was like, wow, like I've never done that before in my life on a slider. And I was like, all right, we'll just keep working with it. And so since then, it's kind of just been toying with that grip and finally getting a feel for it and learning, finger pressure and how to really make it spin. So yeah, it was just going out on a whim and just being lucky that day.
And sometimes I think it takes that, right? Like you've kind of you almost have to be forced out of your comfort zone, right? I know that's something. My son works with Tom House, is a fairly well-known pitching coach, but that's a big thing that he always talks about is be comfortable being uncomfortable. And sometimes that forces you into some new spots and you learn something. But I'm also interested in this. Speaking of Ethan, and I brought up a couple other guys too that we've had on the show, or that I've gotten to know, whether that be, Kobos, Efros, Bain, Roberts, and I feel like I haven't gotten to know you much yet, but I feel like you probably fit in that same category. And I feel like the Cubs have a bunch of these guys who are like super laid back, super easygoing until they toe that rubber, and then all of a sudden it's just like, vroom, something drops over and they just go full maniac or bulldog or whatever you want to call them, and it's just like, oh my God, where did this come from? Do you feel like do you take on a different persona out there on the mound that is decidedly different from just the laid back guy that you might be normally, and how do you kind of build up to that?
Yeah, so I definitely think it's night and day versus me every day versus who I am on the mound. That usually I just kind of read the speed of the game leading up to before a situation where I think that I'll go in, and I'll start to mentally kind of start checking myself in a little bit more and more. And then, the couple innings leading up to it, it's like really flipping the switch and just going through the game plan in my head, the thought process of how I'm feeling that day. And then, once RV calls down and says, "Hey, you're going," it's like I can turn into a completely different person. It's like it's a very controlled madness is the best way to describe it. That I'm trying to see red, but I'm trying to control my breathing at the same time. That I'm basically, you're gonna get my best stuff every pitch. If you hit it, you hit it. If not, then I'm doing my job. And so that's definitely the mindset that I'm taking out there. But as soon as the game's over, if it's a good outing, minutes to try to to try to process what went on, and if it's a bad outing, I'll take a little bit longer and kind of dive into more of the why factor. It was so much worse today, and then it's just like once those thoughts are out of my head, it's boom on to the next day. I feel like you kind of have to have a short memory as well out there to be successful.
Well, yeah, and especially in a relief role, right, where you don't have 4 or 5 or maybe 6 days. We'll let him clear back on here. But no, I mean, I think I'll talk about this a little bit while he's there. While we're waiting on him to come back. But it is interesting the role a reliever has to, kind of where the mentality has to be for a reliever in order to forget that. There we go. We got it back here. Yeah. How
were y'all
yeah,
able to get all that? Hopefully.
yes, absolutely. No, we got you in there. I was just wondering, you had mentioned having a short memory, and that's what I was talking about. For somebody who's in there in a relief role, whether that's maybe pitching back-to-back days or a couple games in 3 days, you don't get that 4 or 5 days off to sort of go through that and reprocess and everything and then come back on the mound. Like you don't get to have a down day. You've got to come back at it. Have you always like were you in more of a starting role in high school, and is this mentality kind of something that you've had to learn to adopt more recently, or when did you start being able to kind of really process properly? Because I know that's so tough when you're a young athlete, right? To really learn how to handle those difficult times or to not get too high on the highs, right? When did that really become part of your game plan, like the visualization and kind of process on the mental side?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say coming back from my second surgery in college is when it really started to hit me a little bit more. Is that I had to learn how to pitch because, coming back from surgery, in my head, I was like, you know what, I can wake up and it'll still be 94, 96. And then I would go pick up a ball and it'd be 88 to 90. And it was just like, I had to really learn. I was having a lot of failures at the time. And so it was like, I learned that I couldn't just constantly weigh myself down out there if I wanted to keep playing and being successful. And, I just had to put a lot of trust that once everything comes back, I'll still be able to perform the way I am now, just with the stuff that I'm used to. But definitely in pro ball too, just being around, you know, different players and veteran guys and talking to them about, what do y'all do at the highest level to succeed? And the number one thing they say is it's always a mental game that, like you said, you can't ride the highs and you can't ride the lows.
Damn it, Louisville.
I'm never going to Louisville again.
You bastards.
Actually, I'm not sure I've ever been there. Maybe I have. Oh, there he is.
I like it a great deal. It's a fun city. You got to go to the Louisville Slugger Museum. Oh, there we go. Now he's back. I'm just you're
Yeah, I'm
this
sorry,
is not
guys.
a good ad.
This is driving me crazy.
You're good. This is just a really bad advertisement for Louisville is all it is. But it's a great place. It's only like a 2-hour drive for me, so I have enjoyed it quite a bit. But I guess one thing I wanted to ask too. So like, John and I both have sons who are playing baseball right now at lower levels, and we've expressed our frustration with various things on that level. What was your experience like with youth baseball? I know. So you're from Southlake, Texas, right? Outside of the Dallas area.
Yes, sir.
I got some friends in Southlake. Have spent some time there. Have had some. There's a great. I forget what the restaurant is, but there's some place around there. It's got an incredible pork chop. But anyway, well, I'm sure there's a lot of places that have incredible pork chop around there. But anyway, what was that experience like for you? I mean, were you gung-ho with the travel ball stuff? Did you get into that, or was it something that you only really got more serious about later on as you got into middle school, high school, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I basically just played rec ball growing up until I was about 10 or 11 years old. And then, that's when the traveling starts to happen. And it gets a lot more fun for a kid that age because it's more about the destination than actually playing. It's like a mini vacation every week. But I'd say around 12 or 13, I joined DBAT. And then actually the year after that, I went and played for a team out of Oklahoma. And the year prior, they had flown me out to Florida. I was one of the guys that I was fortunate enough to be flown around and playing a couple tournaments nationwide. And so I basically, at that point, it became all travel. And I remember we had I think a 4 week span where it was a week-long tournament when I was 14 years old. It went Denver to Dallas to Albuquerque to Puerto Rico. And so I was I was all over the place as a 14-year-old. And so it was a lot of fun. I know I got to see a lot of the country and grow up with a bunch of different guys. So it was something that I always look back on and enjoy.
Nice. And were you just pitching at the time? Were you having visions of grandeur as like a shortstop then? Because I know a lot of kids, right, they come up and you're playing all over the place, and it's only much later that you specialize. So what positions you play as a kid growing up?
So I was shortstop and third base and pitch, and I was also the kid that I threw uncomfortably hard for the age group, and so it was I always I always found myself on the mound at a young age, and so like whenever I was going to tournaments across the country, it was to pitch, even though I like to consider myself a decent hitter at times. Um, but yeah, I'd say once I got to high school, I was fortunate enough to make varsity as a freshman, and our shortstop was going to Kansas State at the time, and he was a senior. And like I was young, had starry eyes. I was like, I think I can play shortstop too. And they kind of had to slow me down. I'm like, look, you got a Division I shortstop ahead of you. It's probably not going to happen. And so from that point forward, I was able to focus more just on pitching. And then I tried to come back and hit, but it was not a pretty sight. So I just gave it up for good.
You got to know where your strengths lie. And obviously you've leaned into those pretty well. So one of a couple more questions and then we'll let you go. But oh man, well, because I want to ask him about the curve and see if that's something that he's worked on. I should have done that earlier because I asked about the slider. But yeah, that's wild, man. I'll go with that. I was not. I will go ahead and admit to the audience, I was not good enough as a 14-year-old to be flying around the country playing baseball. Not
well,
quite.
I love hearing, like our kids are in, right? Well, your son's in the club, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. It's like, hold on. We'll hit this in a second.
We just had to find a new team, speaking of which, but
Right.
that was fun. We got him back. The next
I'm sorry. This is insane.
No, don't worry about it. You listen, far from the worst one. We didn't even get this deep into it with Trent Jambroni. He had the worst connection in the history of anybody. I think there was it was like a hamster on his phone or something that was trying to pick it up. But another really good dude. But and I should have asked you this earlier. I know we talked fastball slider, and you did mention that. I know one of the things that the Cubs as an organization, we've always heard a lot about, whether it be a knuckle curve or a spike curve, something like that. Have you tried to work on developing a different breaking ball? Have you worked with it? Because it's not something that works with everyone, right? Because of just if your natural release point is such, or just the way that it grips, it doesn't work. Have you been working on trying to develop a different breaking ball? Have they worked with you on that spike curve? What's maybe in the works, or what have you scrapped? Either way, that you've tried to adopt here lately.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first got in the organization, they were kind of going through, trying to teach the knuckle curve. And one thing about me is I have really small hands, and so it's hard for me to spike the ball. And so I think it's it's great for the fastball slider, but it hinders me on my curveball a little bit because I can't really get it as deep as I'd like to in my hand. And so once my knuckle curve, like it would have decent shape, but it just had really, really bad, like a spin profile basically. And so we tried to go to a traditional curveball. And I threw a few of them last year. And it's one thing that's still in the works. I'm probably going to start throwing some more here soon. Just don't give that info away. And so I'll definitely start.
Nobody's gonna know. But it is, but this is the part that's cool to me. I love that, and I'm glad we got at least a little bit of that in. But I think maybe once we get him back on, we can probably get a little bit of like one more there, and hopefully get it working here. But no, so
finish
yes,
up.
so definitely no more curveballs, right? No, I'm kidding. Nobody knows. There's nobody from the rest of any AAA organizations or major league organizations watching this. So if you are, stop now because we're talking about his pitch mix. But the last thing, I guess, before we do let you go here, I just kind of want to know, like, what. I mean, obviously, we know what your ultimate goal is, right? We know what you want to have happen. You want to be in Chicago. I want you to be in Chicago. I think John wants you to be in Chicago because I want to see a bunch of hard throwing dudes who have nasty breaking stuff. That's just more fun to watch, right? I want to see somebody. I got to watch you pitch actually when the iCubs came through Indianapolis, and that is just like between you and Roberts and some of these other guys. I know Manny Rodriguez is another guy who I've gotten to see a few times. Just it's as a fan, it's a lot of fun to watch dude just out there pumping gas and then just making hitters look silly with their swings on the slide piece. So what I know the Cubs have talked to you about. They've got plans for you. They know that you're destined for something bigger. How are you taking that? How does that work for you? Do you have a timeline for yourself? Do you have thoughts about that? Where are we going to see you here by the end of the year?
Honestly, I just try to take it day by day. Going into last year, I kind of had a saying within myself. It was, like I want to get to Wrigley by August. That was last year, and it was one of those things that even though I had the end goal, I basically woke up every day and it was I'm just gonna do whatever I need to do for today to prepare for my next outing, and I'll let the rest take care of itself. For this year, I just want to be a contributor whenever that may be. And it's kind of the same mindset that, I just kind of try to step back and, right now I'm trying to iron out some stuff with my breaking ball. And so just being patient with that and just trusting the process that, there's a lot bigger plan ahead than what I have for myself. And so just learning how to be patient for sure this year.
Well, hopefully you don't have to be too patient. Like I said, I know there's a lot of things that go on. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made, but it's been really exciting just to kind of follow that and to see the success that you've had really early on. And like I said, I just as a fan, and I'm a very interested observer, but as a fan, it's exciting to see guys come up, find that success, and really kind of come into their own. Particularly I think under the circumstances that a lot of you guys had. Kind of that 2020 season. College seasons being cut short, everything else, the minor league season just not even happening at all. So. I'm really excited to see what you do, man, the rest of the year. And I wish you the best. I appreciate you taking the time for us and for fighting through all this stuff on the technology side. So hopefully your Wi-Fi works better the rest of the weekend for anything else that you've got to do, making calls and all that. And then hopefully you can go out there and shove in Louisville and, make some hitters look ugly.
Yeah. Make them pay for their bad Wi-Fi. And there, naturally,
right on cue.
And then it just goes away. The Wi-Fi is just done. Okay, cool. Well, that was fun. I don't know if you want to shoot him a text. Do you have his contact info?
No, I'm working through the agency.
Oh, okay, cool.
We'll get some things going.
Yeah, just to let him know he's probably good, and he doesn't need to kind of get back up. But that was cool. That was cool. I mean, obviously, you would hope for a better Wi-Fi connection there, but all the same, really a level-headed guy. And I mean, you really don't hear about guys taking the path that he has taken so far. And I mean, it feels like he's just a moment away from being called up to the Cubs, especially with the team that they have going on in the bullpen, not really being locked down by any stretch of the imagination. So feels like we could possibly see him this year, in Chicago.
I think so, man. I know, and people were asking about it in here. We saw the Cubs made a move, during the rain delay or right at the end of the rain delay to trade Jesse Chavez, which and they traded for another reliever, so it's not like it opens up a spot. But again with Sean Newcomb, who's a lefty, a little bit of a harder thrower, I think we are starting to see more of this transition, and this is another thing. I think we mentioned this very early on. When you have a rotation that is largely guys who don't throw very hard, it's kind of nice to go out there and get that bullpen that can come in there. And hey, they're establishing some guys kind of at the back end, but hopefully we see him up based on whatever happens. I mean, even if it's something where he gets a cup of coffee because of, I don't want anybody to be severely injured, but whether it's injury or whether it's just usage or whatever, that he'll be able to come up and kind of hold down his spot. Because again, if he can even develop, and we heard about that, he said he's going to be starting to use that curveball a little bit more. I mean, you can be a fastball slider pitcher and be very, very effective, but if he is able to incorporate another breaking ball and get even another little wrinkle there, it makes him really, really valuable. So I just appreciate the fact that he was able to fight through that. Like, it is, and I know it's kind of like if you've ever had my kids were actually very well behaved on airplanes, but it's like when you're the parent with a kid who just can't quite you can't keep him from crying on the airplane. You're like apologizing to everybody around you, and it's just like, I'm trying, I'm doing my best. So I appreciate him sticking with us through that. But it was really cool, man. I have not gotten a chance to speak with him before, and it remains fascinating to me. Not that I expect all these pitchers to be assholes, but like the number of guys we have on who are just super quiet, super laid back, and then you see him out there on the mound just like throwing 98 and spinning these breaking balls, getting fired up, and just kind of being assassins out there. It's neat. I always like to see that mentality. So
yeah, it is cool. And you mentioned the Newcomb signing. I know that was kind of like a moment for a lot of people, but at the end of the day, the Cubs need a left-handed arms coming out of the bullpen. They have Wick, who's he started looking a little bit better, but I would say Norris has struggled. And so it's like they don't really have great options of left-hand pitchers. And so while it seems like it was a kind of almost a like trade, I would say, Chavez is obviously older than Newcomb. Newcomb has a lot more velocity than Chavez has, and it's left-handed versus right-handed. So from that perspective, I think in terms of fit in the bullpen, I think Chavez didn't fit quite as well as Newcomb does fit. So I think that's good. I think Ben just tried to head back in. We'll bring him back in. Ben, we were just signing off and getting ready to release you and your Wi-Fi connection as we were making fun of Louisville for their Wi-Fi connection. Suddenly you just went away.
Yeah, but no, seriously, thank you. I just we're texting back and forth with Paul there. So no, really appreciate you spending some time with us, and really just want to wish you the best as you go on, not just this weekend, but the rest of the season. We'll be following you, and again, we'll see what happens. But really, again, looking forward to seeing a bunch of. So this is our goal, right? Like everybody who comes on the show, we love seeing what happens and following those guys and being able to kind of track that progress. So you're going to be the next one. We've seen a few guys already called up who have been guests on here. So this is the requisite stepping stone. So just know that you've knocked one more item off the list, just to let you know. But again, really appreciate it. I'm sorry you've had to deal with the Wi-Fi issues, but get out there and go shove.
Thanks.
See you, Ben.
Thanks a lot, Ben.
I don't know if y'all can still hear me, but I just want to say, thank y'all guys. It keeps cutting in and out pretty hard.
Not a problem at all, man. Take it easy.
All right.
We'll see you out there.
See it. All right, cool. Well, that was fun. And so, where we were talking about Madrigal earlier, you get people chirping, oh, Madrigal hasn't had a good start. It's like, dude, listen, Madrigal is a dude. He is going to play well. He's going to get into the swing of things. He was injured last season. He's with a new organization. Mm-hmm. He's in a new environment. These people who have these reactions to things that don't really warrant reaction, I think that's where it doesn't make a lot of sense. Madrigal should be at the top of the lineup. End of story. Let's talk about the Cubs' performance in this series against the Rays. They came out on Monday and they looked great. 4-2. Hendricks pitched well, 4.1 innings pitched, 5 hits, 2 runs, 6 Ks, 2 walks. Looked like the old Hendricks. Glad to see he bounced back from his abysmal performance just prior. Keegan Thompson came in and just dominated again. Robertson came in and got the save. I mean, really just a really nice performance. Suzuki 2 for 3 2-runs. Wisdom got a home run. It's kind of everything you really wanted to see continue for the Cubs. And then Tuesday's performance, the Cubs lose by 1 run. And this is where it gets a little concerning. Again, you don't want to react to something just based off of performance, but just Justin Steele, he looked really good in the first inning, and then he just fell apart. 2.2 innings pitched, didn't even get out of the third inning. 3 hits, 4 runs, a K. He didn't 3 walks, just didn't have the command after that first inning.
Yeah, and I was sorry. As I'm doing this, I'm just communicating with this, and Ben said he'd be willing to come back on once they're back in Iowa, and he's got a better connection. So we could maybe look at setting something up down the road. But I also think that's pretty cool. That just speaks to again, he could easily just be like, screw these guys, this sucks. But anyway,
yeah.
No, I mean, there's it. I'll make more of a blanket statement, and it's funny that, hey, the Cubs are at 500 right now, right? They're 2 weeks into the season. And while I think there are some things that could be tweaked and some guys who, some of these performances, whether we're looking at like it's way up or it's way down or whatever, it's just always so funny to me that there's a lot of people out there making some very definitive pronouncements about, like, oh, Marcus Stroman sucks. And, that, oh, this guy's horrible. Oh, what are we doing here? And so I just, I think you got to take some time. Although if we look at things like, again, this is when you have to fall back on track record with a lot of these guys, right? You've got to sit there and say, okay, what happened the last week? Like Patrick Wisdom, and everybody's like, oh, sit him down, he's done. And it's like all it took was a trip to Colorado, and he's fine. You know what I mean? Like, is he going to strike out a lot? Yeah, but and I think was that last week when we mentioned it, like. He's striking out at an extraordinary rate, but his swinging strikes were actually much lower. It felt like there was some correction that was due there. And he hadn't hit any homers. And all of a sudden that comes around. Again, with Madrigal, like, as you mentioned there, I mean, that's a guy who's been through some different changes, coming back from surgery with a different organization, trying to figure things out again. Hey, if that's a leadoff spot thing, because the other thing with him is he can play second base on a relatively everyday basis. Is Rafael Ortega going to be an everyday guy? And the answer is I think pretty decidedly no. So I would prefer them.
Not.
They don't have Dexter Fowler, of course. You don't have that guy who like, all right, plug him in, and that's who's going to be our switch hitter. He's going to be our leadoff hitter every day unless we give him an occasional day off. I would like to see them be able to kind of find, and I think part of it is like, again, there's a bunch of dudes who are new to the organization, new to Major League Baseball, period. Say a Suzuki being one, and you're trying to figure out like, okay, where do they fit in this lineup and how do we spark this? But I do think in the early going, there's something to be said for not tinkering around a whole lot with it. Like, put guys in the spot.
You got to let it run. You definitely have to let it run.
Yeah, for a little bit. And that's actually go back to Madden. The one thing that it was like, all right, the Kyle Schwarber thing, like he let that experiment run for like an extra 2 weeks beyond when everybody knew it wasn't working. And then, remember when he tried to put Hayward there and he was like, oh, we're going to leave him there even if he struggles. And he knows that. And he's going to, but it was like, okay, it became abundantly clear that it was just really, really bad. Like even for a guy who hadn't been hitting well, or when I come back to this and it remains just like when I used to make fun of the contracts they had signed or not, Albert Almora got more plate appearances as a leadoff batter with the Cubs than he did in any other spot in the order, which is just shockingly bad to me, right? Like, stop running with it. It's one thing to do an experiment once in a while, but if it ain't working, don't do it anymore. But the first 2 weeks,
and that's my point with
like this are not the time to do it.
But that's my point with Madrigal is like, listen, he's on the team to be the leadoff guy. I mean, if he's not, then why did you trade for him? And then so he gets plugged into the lineup on Monday. He goes 2 for 4 against was it a lefty on Monday?
Yeah, they've
a lefty on Monday.
Yeah, because they flipped
and
it.
And then on Tuesday they bring out the righty opener.
Yeah,
and
then went to a lefty.
And so maybe that's why he wasn't at the top of the lineup, or at least that's kind of the rationale I was using, expecting to see him back in there. But then again, yesterday He's down at, I don't know what he was, 7-8, something like that. And so that's what doesn't make sense to me. And so it's just, we don't want to analyze it too much because it's at the beginning of the season and things kind of happen. But I sure hope that he gets into that leadoff spot and you just leave him there and let it run for a little while. If he's not your leadoff guy, what is he?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because there's, like I said, I don't like him as the number 2. Like, to me, Suzuki should be the number 2 hitter. Plug him in there, let him go, because that's typically that's where you really want. And I know, like, the old school mentality, right, is on base, speed, base stealer guy batting first, and then kind of a second version of that batting second, and then you get kind of your second best slugger at third, and then your cleanup hitter but the game has changed significantly at this point. You do want the high OBP guys in there, but as I mentioned earlier, what scares me a bit about Madrigal is again, outside of, he popped that homer in spring training, which is kind of fun to see there. I mean, and you saw Nico Horner be the first guy to hit a home run for the Cubs this year. But when you get guys who have a very high batted ball profile and who hit a lot of grounders, I don't want that guy batting second, because if my leadoff hitter is getting on base a lot in front of him, I'm immediately setting up a higher percentage of ground or double play potential. And so I would, if Madrigal's not first, then he's got to be deep in the order, 8th or 9th, and if he's not first, then who is? And I know, Horner is we see a little bit back and forth, but at least he's a speed guy. I mean, Horner right now, I mean, that dude can flat out move. So if you are looking at more of a traditional sense, you put him up there. I would even put Suzuki. I mean, if you want to talk about on base percentage, you want to talk about a guy. Suzuki's got elite sprint speed, right? Which is, I don't think people expected from a guy who looks kind of stout. But I mean, hell, if he weren't hitting so well and driving in runs at the pace that he is, I'd say he should be your leadoff hitter, because if you look at a guy who's going to get on base and going to be able to move, go first to third on singles, that dude will light it up. But they need him to produce runs. So Madrigal's not a run producer. So you either put him first, in my opinion, or then 8th or 9th, and but then if you put him 8th or 9th, who bats first? And then are you running into the same issues of him? So I don't know. It's not an ideal lineup, I think, in terms of, what they really want to do. I still remain concerned about the lack of pop consistently, although, the weather warms up. We'll see. This weekend, hey, they're facing Pittsburgh pitching. It should be in like the 70s and 80s at Wrigley. Maybe the sun comes out a little bit more. Wisdom and Schwindel look like they're swinging it better. Maybe that changes. So,
yeah. Well, so one thing that we have not talked about was Wednesday's game, which was yesterday. The Cubs looked terrible, and Stroman just got shelled, and he's looked bad his last 2 games. And again, I don't want to, get caught up in the details, but this is something that is a little concerning. 2 outings in a row, and he's saying he doesn't feel comfortable on the mound. And so it's will he bounce back? Will he fix this stuff? Yeah, probably. But like, is he going to be as good as he's been this year? That's where I start to kind of wonder. I mean, he's not a number 1 guy on a pitching staff, at least for a team that's going to make it and contend in the playoffs, And so, and he's going to have a kind of little bumps along the way, but this is a little bit of a bigger bump than I expected. And he just really just did not have it at all yesterday.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at him, it's like, if you had a legit, contending rotation, I think he would probably slot in like 2, right? And then Hendricks would be 3. That's, if we're being honest, and the way they're pitching, the way both of them have been pitching this year, even that is very, very lofty, right? Because neither of them, outside of really their first outings each, I think looked, which is the other thing that's a little bit weird, like especially for Hendricks to be so sharp right away and then to really struggle with it. But yeah, Stroman has looked physically uncomfortable at times out there, and he noted after his last one, his mechanics are wonky. Now, some of that again has to do with it is a shortened spring. There's a very big difference between, pitching on the side and then pitching in spring training and then ramping up for the major league season. But he was talking about where it just, if things are working, your mechanics should feel like second nature, and it shouldn't feel any different on any pitch. You've got a different grip. Maybe you're manipulating your wrist a little bit differently, right? But the way you move through space should be the same. And he clearly does not seem to be feeling like he says that he's not, but when you see him out there and he's kind of hitching and twisting a little bit and he's kind of moving stuff around, like it's just, that speaks to me of someone who is not comfortable, from whether that's psychological or physical, I don't know. And I'm not suggesting that he's injured or anything. I'm just saying like something's not quite right with his mechanics right now, and he needs to figure that out. And I think if he's able to dial it in, but this happens a lot. We've seen, look what happened with Yu Darvish, and a lot of that was injury. But then look what happened with John Lester, right? He was not what was kind of expected right out of the gate. It took those guys some time to really settle in and find them. So I think once things settle in, the weather gets more consistent, I think that all helps. So I'm concerned because it's just, this is worse than what we would have expected, even from a little bit of an adjustment. But at the same time, I think he's proven, again, with his pitch mix, with the things he's able to do, I think that improves, because what we're seeing right now is like, he's a ground ball guy, but we're seeing him give up a lot of hard contact in the air. And
with this team, you really can't afford to give any away. I guess that's kind of my point with Stroman's last two games, is that it feels like he's given these last two games away. And with this team, you have a team that's probably close to a 500 team, maybe a little bit better, and can get in the playoffs and probably make some noise. But if you give, a few games away, that could make a difference of getting in the playoffs or not.
Yeah, and I think the thing with last night that made things worse, the game was very lopsided anyway, but you knew, they had to move the start time up 70 minutes. You knew rain was coming in, and it was one of those where you felt from the start like the team that jumps out early is probably the one that's going to win, because if they are able to get in enough innings, which they were, they're going to postpone it. You're not going to postpone it. They're just going to call it, and then you're going to have a shortened game. And so, putting yourself in an early hole like that, and listen, the defense didn't do him any favors, and they only scored 2 runs, so it's not like it really would have mattered, right? Even if he had pitched pretty well, and then, I think just Norris alone, or was it Martin gave up a couple, right? But, I don't think it would have mattered, but it is one of those, it's just tough when you have that. The team that scores first is going to win most of the time, period. Yeah, right. Sure. And so when you do that early and you're saying, it's only 6 innings, you lop off a third of the game. So yeah, psychologically it becomes a little bit more difficult. So, we'll see. I think once we start looking at, hey, now you're 5 and 6 starts into the season, and, the weather has, because let's think about it though. It's like early on was cold, kind of damp and gross. And then you go to Colorado and it's, it's less humid, and now you're at altitude, and then you come back to Chicago again, it's cold and wet and gross. That's not really, it's not great weather for anybody. You would think it would help pitchers a little bit. That hasn't really been the case, but I would think once we settle things out, you get into May, and now you start getting a little bit more consistent weather. Things start happening and you can get into a groove. I think these next few starts, then we can start making some judgments about, all right, this is still a little scary. Like, you got to figure it out. You go 3 bad starts in a row, 4 bad starts in a row. That's a little bit more concerning to me than just a couple early on.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And Suzuki struck out twice yesterday, so he's a bust.
Yeah, clearly.
Right. Average is now 387.
Horrible.
What are we
horrible doing? Jeez.
That's a joke, everyone.
Yeah. He's awful. Send him down. DFA. Send him down with Madrigal and Wisdom. Get rid of them all.
Exactly. So the Cubs play 4 against the Pirates. Supposed to be a gorgeous weekend. Saturday just keeps looking better and better. I was actually looking at trying to fly up there. For those who don't know, I have a close relative that works for American Airlines, so I fly for free. And so I was thinking about trying to come up to Chicago on Saturday, just because the weather looks so amazing. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it because my son has a Little League game, and I happen to be one of the assistant coaches, but now it's supposed to be 85. It was like yesterday, it was like 75. Yesterday morning, it was like 75. And then like the afternoon, it was like 78.
Up. Well, hell, I'm looking at it like right now, like right here where I am right now, it's 57 and cloudy. But by 5 o'clock, my son's got a game at 5:30. So at 6 o'clock, right now it's 57 and cloudy. At 6 o'clock, it's going to be 70 and partly sunny. So
nice.
that is like that's
a little taste.
That's the better side of Midwestern weather. It usually goes the other way. But then so it's gonna get up to like 72 possibly. Tomorrow 76, a little bit. We're supposed to be 82 and partly sunny on Saturday. So
sweet taste of summer, baby.
We'll see, man.
Don't get too used to it. It'll be snowing in 2 days, I'm sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
Or could be.
No doubt.
So the Cubs play Pittsburgh. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't concerned about Mark Leiter getting another start. He's starting on Thursday, and he was downright awful. I mean, he looked good for the first inning or
early.
two. Yeah,
that's speaking of David Ross making changes when he needs to. It's kind of like, all right, baby, give him that hook. And that's one of those where, hey, you got into the third. All right, you start. You walk the leadoff batter in the third. I'm pulling you. Like that's where I'm at with it. I think there's got to be a short lead. Although that's the other problem, right? Although the short game yesterday, the only good thing about that is they didn't have to burn 3 innings of relievers.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Short starters. That's essentially like having a starter go 6 or 7 innings, which they haven't done yet. I don't think they've had a starter complete 5 innings yet, have they? Maybe once. Hendrick early, and then
I don't know that anybody's gone into the 6th.
Yeah, it's been really.
If so, they didn't last the entire 6th.
Yeah, which is, and again, you have the
it's
2
early,
extra roster spots.
Shortened spring training.
Yeah, they can do this pretty. You can get away with it for now, but we are fast approaching the end of the month. At which point they're going to have to drop 2 of those roster spots, and then it turns into you cannot have your pitchers going 3 innings, 4 innings. Your starters, that is, Keegan Thompson. That's great, and he's essentially working as a piggyback guy because you've got to lean on Thompson to go another 3 innings.
And that's a weird thing about Thompson is
once in a while.
That's a guy who really could, the way he's been pitching, you really could see him in the starting lineup, but you don't want to take him out of your bullpen because then who are you going to replace him with?
Right. And that's where, again, which is what's kind of funny is that Chavez was supposed to be that guy, right? They were stretching him out to be that guy. And then immediately I still think that was a weird, I saw that come across. I saw somebody report it, and then I saw the Cubs official tweet. Because when I first saw it, I was like,
refresh?
Really? Hold on, really? And then the Cubs did it, and I was like, is this legit? Like, this is really the Cubs. This isn't like a parody account or something like this happened. And it just is kind of weird, right? Because like Newcomb and he came up as a starter, and he did have kind of a high pedigree, was drafted by the Angels. Interestingly enough, was traded to Atlanta as part of the Andrelton Simmons trade, right? So now they're both with Chicago. Lefty, throws 96, I think 95, 96, so a hard throwing lefty, which the Cubs, again with Brad Wick being out, they don't really have any of those guys. But he's walked a whole lot of batters and given up a whole lot of home runs these last few seasons for him, as he's been more of a primary reliever. And even some of that 2020, I think 2020 season, he was a starter, but only 5 starts. It's a little weird because you do get more diversity with the lefty. You do get a much higher velocity, right? Because Chavez was like 90 miles an hour. So I like that. But this feels like sort of, they bumped the ceiling up, but I don't know. They might have dug the floor a little deeper as well.
Well, I think we're going to see Norris. I don't know if he's got options or what the deal is, but I think he's going to be one of the pitchers.
He may not be long for this for the roster.
So there's one of your lefties. Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I saw the email from the Cubs announcing a trade, I thought it was going to be something about Abbott or Diekman. To be honest with you, kind of surprised it wasn't. We're still waiting to see how that gets resolved because the 10-day window is still open.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect to see. I mean, I would be shocked. I would be shocked if Abbott wasn't claimed. Like, that would be a real surprise. I think we'll see some kind of a trade there. Again, it was kind of like with Tyson Miller, Dwayne Underwood Jr. We've seen a couple of those guys who were very, very similar, actually, in guys who were very highly rated prospects, supposed to be kind of the next pitching guy to come up, and that didn't quite pan out. So, but those are also primarily products of kind of their older school of thought, right? Where those weren't necessarily these higher ceiling type guys who had just really the nasty stuff. You're looking, okay, back end rotation type guys, maybe. So, Yeah, but Dykeman, I don't know. I could maybe see him clearing waivers. I don't know that there's a whole lot there that other teams would really jump up and get. But, he is a guy who's shown a little bit of power before. It just hadn't really shown up in games. So, which is really where it's most important, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would think.
Yeah.
So the Cubs play Friday. They play 1:20. Jose Quintana versus Drew Smyly. Smiley's been incredible. So you're looking for kind of a down game from him, or at least that's what I think if you were expecting him, he can't continue to be as amazing as he.
Although nor can Quintana be as good as what he was against the Cubs the last time. So who knows?
Yeah, something's going to give there.
Yeah.
And so Zach Thompson against Kyle Hendricks on Saturday, and then you've got Brubaker versus Justin Steele. So, I mean, going into this, the Cubs dropping 2 out of 3 to Tampa Bay, I don't think is all that shocking. It's nothing to be overly concerned about. But you definitely want to see the Cubs win, obviously 2 out of 2 here, but preferably 3 out of 4. And if they win 3 out of 4, they finish 4-3 on the homestand. And would that be considered a successful homestand? I think at this point, probably. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, hey, you get to 3. Splitting with Pittsburgh would not be great, because then, you're falling a game down on the homestand, especially with them. I mean, Pittsburgh was a little bit surprising there, but I think if they fall back down to earth a little bit, I think you got to take 3. And then you don't feel. I mean, hey, 4-3. That's. I mean, if you keep going through chunks like that, whether you want to break it down by 5 games, 7 games, 9 games, whatever, break it down in those chunks. You break down 9-game chunks and you go 5-4 every 9 games, you're going to have a really good season by the time it's all said and done. Whatever segment you break that into,
sure,
with an odd number, right? So we can be above. If you're a game above with each of those segments, you're going to be okay. And that's all that really It's all that really matters. Just go out and win 3 or 4 from Pittsburgh and then move on. And because the really tough part of the schedule, they close a month pretty difficult, and then May kind of opens and closes with some difficult matchups as well. So you gotta make hay while the sun shines, as they say, right? So
yeah, you got 3 to close out the month against Atlanta, and then 2 against the Brewers, both away, finishing against the Brewers on the 1st of May, and then you're coming home to the White Sox, the Dodgers, and then away at San Diego before things lighten up a little bit. But it's like you kind of need to build up a reserve of wins there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sure would be nice to get 3 out of 4 from the Pirates. It's not necessary, but I mean, listen, if you have any hope of the Cubs being above 500 come the trade deadline, I have to believe they really need to kind of pick it up here towards the end of the month and be well above 500, kind of going into this stretch that I don't know, but who knows? Baseball, but this is a very tough stretch. So
yeah,
it should be interesting. The only upside is that when they come home from Milwaukee, which obviously is like a home game for the Cubs, I wonder, do you think they stay in a hotel in Milwaukee? Probably, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, surely. They're not
Just
going back and forth with those. Yeah.
But they're, it's almost a home game. They're not far away. And then they come home and they do get a day off before they have to face the White Sox, which is nice. And that's at home. And then they have another day off before they face the Dodgers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're hitting a stretch like the Cubs are getting ready to hit, that's really kind of the way you would want to kind of craft it, I guess. If there's a positive spin on that, that's all I got.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Anyways, the Cubs kick off the Pirates series tonight at hopefully the weather should be good, I think, right?
I think so. I think it's supposed to be better.
No more rain out stuff going on, and that's a 6:40 Central start time. So we'll circle back probably next Monday after the Pittsburgh Pirates series. Hopefully we're talking about a sweep, fingers crossed, and we'll see you guys then.
Cool. See you, everybody.
Bye.